Hey everyone, you're about to hear a call between a student of mine and myself where we talk about how to handle it in the room as a private independent escort. So you're working alone, you don't have the benefit of being in a parlor or where there's other people around or with an agency where you know that other people have your back. How do you handle it if a client presents at some point during the booking with a hygiene issue or some other sort of matter, which means that you would like to modify the booking? So it might be the case that before the booking, you've communicated a level of detail about what will happen during the booking. Sometimes that will be specific sexual services, and sometimes that will be something else. But obviously, if you're meeting a client for the first time, or really at any time, if you meet somebody, you don't know how they're going to be until they present that day in front of you. So the specific example that I'm going to talk you through here is if you were with a client, the booking has started, you've probably got the money, and you're doing a health check, and you see something down there that means that you're not comfortable providing the service that you had said you were going to provide beforehand, or which was indicated in some way you were going to provide. So I'm going to use a specific sexual service in this example, but this could really apply to anything. So I'll refer to BBBJ, which is an uncovered blowjob, so uncovered oral sex. It might be that you have it listed on your ad, or a client has asked you specifically if you do it. He may have asked you in a more indirect way if for some reason you're communicating more covertly. But regardless of what's happened, he's presented in the room and the expectation is that you're going to do this service. But then you get into the bathroom, their pants are down, you're checking them out, and for some reason you no longer feel comfortable doing that service. And you want to let the client know before the booking that you're going to modify the service, but you want to do it in a way which means that it isn't awkward, uncomfortable. You typically don't want to upset the client. And you don't want to lose the booking, right? Because it's not always the case that we see something that means that we want to cancel the booking. In this scenario, it might just mean that you'd like to use a condom instead of not using a condom. And I want to state here that you are free to do that at any time. You do not have to do something that you said you were going to do if you're not comfortable with it. You do need to be aware of the consequences of that, which may mean that the client decides to cancel the booking, which is well within his right. And you want to be prepared for how you handle that, which is exactly what I'm going to cover here. So what my student and I talk about is just this exact scenario. And we reference as we talk a little script that I gave her, which is simple, easy, non-confrontational. I've used many, many times throughout my career, and 99.9% of the time have had zero issues with it. What I've created now, and I'll start dropping in material as I go, is a free resources for escorts folder. I'll give you the link here in this video, and I'll start linking in other places as well. Feel free to share it with any other escorts. So as I come up with stuff like this that I want other people to be able to have access to, I'll just drop it in here and you can access it at any time. And I really hope that it helps you out. So basically, in this scenario, the client has arrived, they've given us the money, we've done some kind of intro, they're now in the bathroom, they've got their pants down, and we're doing a visual health check to see if there's anything that makes us feel that we need to modify the service and go from an uncovered blowjob to a covered blowjob. So this is a pretty confronting scenario. You're literally there with the lights on, the client's got his pants down. This is what I'll say. I'll say, John, I've just noticed, and whatever the thing is I've noticed, I will state what it is. So don't beat around the bush. I don't make a massive problem out of it either. I'll just state very factually and concisely what I see. So, John, I've just noticed there are some bumps here in this area that I'm not familiar with. This happens sometimes, so I'm not able to offer an uncovered blowjob, but don't worry, I'll use a condom. I'm very talented orally regardless, and we're going to have an amazing time. That is literally all I say. Notice how I'm assumptive about it. Like, I just assume that this is cool, that we're going to have an amazing time. And in my view, of course it's okay, because regardless of the fact that this is a commercial service, I'm a lady, he's a man, he wouldn't dare expect me to do something that I'm uncomfortable with. And you can actually apply this to any commercial scenario as well. If you're going to get a physiotherapist massage, you wouldn't expect the therapist to just do something that they're not comfortable with. You may expect that if they're not comfortable doing something you want, that you can leave and get your money back. but you don't expect, any reasonable person doesn't expect that they'll do something they're not comfortable with. And so this is the key difference, is that this is my attitude to all of these situations, as well as my belief. This is my genuine belief, is that, of course, if I'm stating very reasonably, hey, John, you've got some weird fucking bumps here. I'm not familiar with that, so I'm just going to do this instead so that we can still have an amazing time, and I guarantee we're going to have an amazing time. It is my expectation that he'll be okay with that. And that's how I approach it. And when I approach it that way, it means that I leave him, the client. So we as the escort think that we're in an uncomfortable position because we have to point out to this guy that he's got some weird shit happening down there, and we feel uncomfortable. But actually, when I take this approach, and this is genuinely how I feel about it, I put him in the uncomfortable position of making an issue of something that I have been totally polite and accommodating about. I haven't been rude. I haven't been inquisitive or interrogating. I haven't said, what's this? Where's it come from? I mean, you can also ask at the same time, hey, John, I've noticed these bumps. Do you know what that is? Specific to bumps, sometimes they're skin tags on the client's genitals. And for the most part, skin tags are like harmless. They're just skin. But you also don't know if they're warts, right? And if that's the case, you might not want to be doing anything, and you might cancel the booking entirely. But anyway, I digress. Sometimes you can ask what it is. But for example, if this was the issue, say there was a strong odor, perhaps if the client doesn't have great hygiene, or if he's uncircumcised and he's not washing behind the foreskin, then you might be happy to do a blowjob, but you just want a condom over it because that's a barrier between you and the issue. And so you don't need to have a discussion about that. You don't need to say, oh, I've noticed a strong odor. Have you noticed that? What is that? You're just saying, I've noticed a bit of an odor, which is common. This happens sometimes, and so I'm not able to do this, but don't worry, I'll use a condom. I'm so talented. We're going to have an amazing time. So I'm being totally polite and accommodating. I'm not being rude. I'm doing my best not to make him uncomfortable. If he wants to make an issue out of it, that's his choice. Plus, what I'm also focused on is what I know he ultimately wants most. He ultimately wants a great experience. And don't forget that at this point, he's probably, if you've gotten the money relatively close to the start of the booking, which I recommend you do, he's already paid. He's already there. So he's left work. He's made arrangements within his personal life, whether that be a partner, a wife, kids. He's come to your location perhaps, or he's had you come to him and paid for your travel. He's now also naked in front of you. You're hot, beautiful, ready to go. What is he going to do? Argue about it? And then when he doesn't win the argument, put his clothes on and leave? Because that's potentially where it would end. Now, of course, he could do that. I'm not saying that some clients don't do this, but when you handle it in the above way and you move swiftly on, you assume that it's okay and you just keep moving forward and you act like it's no problem, then really it doesn't need to be a problem. I found that it is statistically unlikely that clients will actually, if you handle it this way, stand there in front of you with their you-know-what hanging out and say, oh, no, that doesn't work. You have to do this, you have to do that. Most people just don't behave that way. They're uncomfortable. They're embarrassed about the fact that you've pointed out there's something wrong with them. They just want to have a great time. They've spent the money. They're here. That's it. And look, if he does do that, then you want to have a planned out refund policy for situations like these, because they can happen at any time. And by the way, they can happen with repeat clients, okay? Any repeat client can rock up and there's a rash. There's something weird. There's something there. Something has changed. So it doesn't matter how many times you've seen somebody in this profession. If you're providing a sexual service, they could be, a client comes to see you, they've got a cold sore in their mouth, and you may just not be willing to do anything physical at all. So you want to know what your refund policy is in that scenario. It might be that you just say, I'm not going to be able to continue with the booking. However, I'd love to see you another time. Let's say it's a cold sore, when that cold sore's cleared up. So let's reschedule. I'll hold the funds towards that next booking. You can do that. You might say to them, I'll give you 50% back. It's really up to you. The next most important part of this is knowing the difference between having a plan and being flexible to change the plan in the interest of your safety. And this is really where we need to set aside our principles, our expectations, what we think is fair, our sense of justice. If you're an independent escort and at this point you're alone in the room with a man It's possible that most people don't know where you are. If he kicks up a fuss and you become scared, the best response is to give him the money back in full and ask him to leave. Again, when these situations do unfold negatively in the few occurrences that I've heard of, also 99.9% of the time, giving the client the money back and asking them to leave is the best way to deal with it. Because usually that's what they're ultimately upset about. Of course, they're upset that they're horny and they're ready to go and they're not getting what they want. But now they're annoyed and they feel it's an injustice. And some people will unfortunately take this the wrong way and behave poorly. And that sucks. But at the end of the day, you're a female alone in a room with him. And I can tell you who's going to win if it becomes physical, and it's not going to be you. So kind of like if you're a passenger walking on the street and there's a car coming, it doesn't matter if you have right of way. If the car isn't stopping, you should get the fuck out of the way, because you're the one that's going to be hurt if you don't. It doesn't matter what should or shouldn't happen in the moment. So as a further to this has actually never happened in my entire career. Never. I've never had a client present with an issue and I've handled it this way and it has gone poorly. If I'm feeling generous, I might offer the client an option. So I had a client present once and he had a cut halfway down his penis. I was offering uncovered oral and I gave him the choice in that moment. I said, "Oh, John, I've just noticed that there's this cut here. I'm not going to be able to do uncovered oral the way I usually do. So I can either put a condom on or I can put my hand over where the cut is and I will put my mouth to where my hand is. What would you prefer?" Now, I didn't have to do that. I could have just actually not said anything or just gone ahead with saying, "I'm just going to put a condom on because there's a cut here." But I was comfortable and confident to say that. Now, here's an optional sentence you might add at the end of this. You can also say, after we've said, "We're going to have an amazing time, just letting you know, that's okay, right? Right? That's cool." I personally don't say this because I don't care if they're okay with it whatsoever. In my view, they're the one that's turned up with a problem. If you have gunk all in your foreskin, I mean, you know that you have gunk in your foreskin. If you present with a cut on your penis that I can visibly see, you know that there's a cut. Now, you might not have thought about the fact that I'm uncomfortable with that, but it's not my problem that you haven't thought about that. All I care about is providing a great experience for the client within boundaries that I'm comfortable with and getting paid for that service. And if they're not on board with that, sweet, they can leave. And they can leave their money behind, or they can leave 50% of their money behind, whatever I've decided. But if they kick up a fuss, and I just give them their money and let them walk out the door. I've fully refunded clients before when I've cancelled the booking because I've been uncomfortable, but I chose to give them their money back. And this has only ever happened once, where I had a client show up, and this is actually the most strenuous situation I've ever had. A client showed up. He was young. He was probably drug affected. I was using a new in-call that day that I actually hadn't told anybody about, which was really the source of the issue. And I just felt really uncomfortable with him. And so he didn't do anything wrong. He was lovely. He was pleasant, but he got there and my intuition, my escort intuition just said, "I don't want to see this client." And I didn't want to have a conversation about it. I didn't want to give him options, and I didn't want to risk things going sour because I was already uncomfortable. And so I just said to him, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to go through with the booking today, but here's the money back and you can go. The door's just there." And he actually didn't make a fuss about it. He just totally left. And the reason I chose to give it the money back was because I didn't really have a clear articulation for what the problem was. It's not like I could say to him, "Hey, John, you have a dirty, disgusting rash everywhere and you've booked this time with me. I've set the time aside for you. I'm going to be keeping the fee, but once this clears up, you're very welcome to rebook and I'll add some bonus time." So that's a way if you had a more extreme situation where a client shows up with something really horrendous and he's a total idiot. That actually doesn't happen that often, but sometimes it happens. And if he does that, then you're well within your rights to just say, "I'm keeping the fee," and hopefully he doesn't kick up a stink. I might add a sweetener, which I may not follow through on, but I'll add it so that the situation goes more smoothly. So if that happened for me to say, "I'm not going to be able to go through with the booking now, but I would love to see you another time. I'm keeping the fee because I've set the time aside for you. I've come here. I've had to pay for the location. But next time when you come back fully recovered, I'll add some bonus time. And then I can just make a decision on whether or not later I'm actually comfortable seeing a person who was happy to rock up to an escort booking with a rash all over himself. I'm probably not going to see him, but it doesn't matter. He's gone now. I've been compensated for my time, and I can just block him and never deal with him again. So simple, copy paste. You can memorize this, have it ready to go. But the power is really not in the specific words. The power is in the belief and the attitude. And also a bit of experience and conviction, because we are alone in the room with somebody that we sometimes won't know. And depending on your setup, you may not have anybody else who knows that you're there, which is pretty scary. That's not my recommendation. My recommendation is that somebody knows where you are or knows that you're doing the job at all times, but that's not practical for everybody in this job. So sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you're alone and you feel uncomfortable. And so if you're just starting with this and you find that you're a little bit more timid, you feel that this is a little bit too direct, or you just don't feel comfortable, then you can just add this sentence on the end. Just letting you know, that's okay, right? And always be bubbly, always be friendly, playful. You're there, you're hot, they've booked you for a reason. And you'll find that most of the time the client will just say, yeah, sure. Or he might suggest something else. Or he may say, oh, those bumps are nothing to worry about. And this is why I don't add this sentence as well, by the way, is because I don't want to have a discussion about it. I have made up my mind. And we don't need to talk about what your bumps might be, John. Your bumps are there, and I'm not putting my mouth anywhere near that. But if you say, just letting you know that's okay, right, you open the potentiality of that discussion. Or like strong odor. Oh, don't worry, Isabel, I'll just like wash it really hard in the shower. Like nobody. You're like 40 years old. You haven't been washing that gunk for 40 years. I don't think that your 5-second shower is going to be dealing with that shit effectively. So you can say that, but just note that if you add that to make yourself feel more comfortable, you also open yourself up to the risk that you now have to have a conversation about something that you possibly don't want to have a conversation on. If you are open, like I have had clients present with bumps, and I will ask them, hey, these bumps here, and this is when I feel 90%, this is when I feel pretty confident, 90% confident that they're genuinely skin tags, right? Like I only ask the question as like a bit of just like mental reassurance to myself, but I've seen them enough times to know what they are. Then I might say, hey, these here, have they always been there? Like, is this a rash that you've developed recently? And then I have to make a judgment call as to whether or not I'm going to believe their answer. If you're in that situation, I recommend that you don't ask them and you don't leave it to chance and you just put a condom over it. Ultimately, it would be great if we just didn't do this service at all and that clients didn't like it, and that it wasn't the case that so many people in the industry do it, myself included when I used to work, that it's the expectation and it's becoming harder and harder to get work without it. But anyway, I digress. So this is here for you and you can use it. You can modify it as you need. But like I said, really the biggest thing is the approach. And when this has happened, what usually happens for me and for other escorts that I've worked with is they present with an issue. I handle it using this approach. We continue on with the booking. He has an amazing time, obviously, and then leaves me a 5-star review, regardless of that. Because 5 minutes after this interaction, maybe not even 5 minutes, maybe even 30 seconds afterwards, I am moving the booking on to give him a great time. Like I might get in the shower with him and I'll give him an experience that no other escort will give. And that's what stands out. Not the fact that there was like this really thin piece of plastic between my mouth and his genitals. If he's had a great time, a great experience, that will fade into the background, particularly if you've handled it this way. So that's all. I'll leave you to listen to the video.
Yeah, I loved your suggestion with the if I get a smelly client, etc. It's a very good, very, very, very good advice. I'm definitely going to keep that handy.
I can't recall. Have you worked in a parlor before?
Yes, quite a few of them.
You have. Okay.
Yeah.
I have noticed that because I've obviously started in parlors. Girls that work with parlors
same.
Are typically like this approach that I'm taking, though they tend to be less polite than what I am. They're usually the ones that I deal with that are just because they've seen so many clients and they've been in that environment, completely fine to just be like, nope, I'm not doing that. So I thought maybe you hadn't been, but I couldn't remember.
Like in a parlor context.
Yeah, usually if I work with people who have only independently escorted, or particularly they're
Mm,
transitioning from sugar to escorting, they
mm,
typically have more reservations around this stuff going wrong in the room and kind of not knowing how to handle it. It's usually parlor girls who are more comfortable just
mm.
saying no about things because they've seen such a higher volume of clients in a particular environment. So I just couldn't remember.
Yeah, oh for sure, and I certainly was very comfortable with it. I think I became a bit more nervous once the price became higher. Do you know what I mean? Like I
Mm,
still want to be a bit more not as blunt. Like when you're working in brothels, you're like, all right, pants down, dick out, open, torch. I don't do that now at the price point. Like I'm more subtle, a little bit more classy about it, given the money they're paying versus a brothel. So I
I
think I
just
wondered, like, fuck, how do I navigate that in like, because in brothels I had no issues with it. Like, I didn't care.
okay, okay. Just
Like, I'd
keep in
still feel
mind.
awkward, but I would, I'd obviously reject a failed health check, of course,
Okay.
politely, but yeah.
I just keep in mind that one, if you're saying no, unless you're somebody who's like really, really, really sensitive, like there are some girls, who won't do it on an uncircumcised, stuff like that, where there's nothing wrong with the client. Actually, it's just a preference. That's slightly different. But even then, you're providing an intimate service. You're within your right to do whatever you want. But for those girls, I
Mm,
usually tell them to text it. Um, but if you're not in that basket, if you're saying no, it's because there's something
mm.
wrong with them. They are the problem,
Yeah,
not you. And if you are
yeah,
just, and remember, they're more uncomfortable at this point. They're like, have their dick out in front of you and they're horny and they've already given you money. Like most clients
yeah, for sure.
just want to be made to feel comfortable. So if you can deliver the news, if you think it's necessary to tell them, like what I've put here, like I'm going to do
Mm,
this instead of this, just so you know, in a way that doesn't make them feel uncomfortable or upset or like they're not going to be able to get hard now because they're embarrassed. It's just not going to be
mm.
a problem for most people.
Yep, yep. All sounds good.
If you want to learn more escorting tips, just click the link below this video.